Hello to everyone who is watching our Bible Friends videos. I'm just so glad today that I get to talk about Joseph. Now there's 3 Josephs that we know of in the Bible, probably more than 3, but one was Joseph of Arimathea, who provided the cave where Jesus was buried, the tomb where Jesus was buried, when the one in which the stone rolled away. Then there's Joseph, who was Mary's husband, who took Joseph and Mary went down to Egypt with baby Jesus. But the Joseph I'm talking about is the 11th son of Jacob. And in that family, there was quite a bit of confusion because there were 4 moms and 1 dad, all living in the same house. And the moms often argued with each other. And the sons of these 4 moms often argued with each other also. Joseph was number 11 of all those boys, and he had dreams which turned out to be actually a blessing, but at the beginning of the dreams, it didn't seem like it was much of a blessing. Because he dreamed one time that they were all out in the field gathering their sheaves of wheat. And so wheat is something that can be bundled together until it's time to, after you kind of cut the wheat and it's no longer growing, you can bundle it together in a sheaf until it's time to process it. So he dreamed that there were 12 sheaves, and his sheaf stood up straight and tall, and all the other sheaves bowed to him. Well, in a family that's already arguing with each other a fair amount, you can imagine that that dream did not go over very well. So they started to call him the dreamer. But then he had another dream. Now, part of the background of this dream is that he is the favorite child of his father. And he had a coat of many colors, which was like a very fancy coat, which none of the other brothers had, and they couldn't help being jealous of him. So he had a dream which even his father realized that he had gone a little bit too far in sharing this dream. He dreamed that the sun and the moon and all the stars bowed down to him. Right away, his father got the meaning of the dream, and he said, "Now, son, do you mean that I, the sun, and your mother, the moon, and all of your family, the stars, are going to bow down to you?" Father wasn't too happy about that. But he trusted Joseph. Jacob trusted Joseph to go and find out how his brothers were doing. They were, as you know, that you had to go a long distance sometimes with your flocks, would be the sheep or the goats that you were raising, so they could find plenty of pasture and water. So they went down to a place called Dothan. And he was supposed to go find them. He asked someone, "Have you seen, 10 brothers wandering around?" "Yep, we saw them, and they're down at Dothan." So off he went to Dothan. Well, they saw him coming away a long way off, and they said, "Oh, well, here comes the dreamer. Let's see what we can do about that. Let's kill the dreamer." Well, Reuben said, "Do not do any harm to the boy." Now remember that Reuben is the one who said that, "Do not do any harm to the boy," because he knew that his life was closely bound up with his father who loved him so much. But Reuben was out for a while. He was trying to figure out what to do because he, was him against 9 brothers, and how he could rescue the boy. He was trying to figure that out. So he was gone for a while. They all threw him in a well. Remember Jeremiah being put in a well? Well, Joseph got put in a well. And so Reuben was thinking, well, while he's in that well, I'm going to come up with a plan how to save him. But by the time Reuben got back, the well was empty because the boys, the other 9 brothers, had traded him to a slave trader who was on his way to Egypt. Well, they had already gotten the money. They couldn't run after them. And anyway, they thought that was a good idea. But then Reuben said, well, what's our father going to say? Well, we can't really go home and tell Dad that we sold his favorite son to a slave trader. Let's do this. Let's take his coat of many colors, which they had not allowed him to keep, and let's kill a goat, and we'll dip the coat in the blood of the goat, and then we'll say, is this your son's coat? We found it. He must have been torn by a lion. Lies, lies, lies. So they went home and told their dad that, and their father was so very sad and sorry that I think they were all feeling a little bit guilty. They probably were feeling very guilty as the time went on. So the slave trader traded Joseph. He was a smart young kid and had a lot of potential for helping people. So they traded Joseph to a man named Potiphar. Potiphar was rather a lazy man. And he said, oh, I've got myself a good little slave here. He can take care of my whole house, and I won't worry about a thing. I'll just take it easy. But Joseph was accused of something that he did not do, and he was thrown into prison. Now, once he got to prison, it was the same kind of situation. The prison keeper said, oh, we got a prisoner here that's not too bad. Looks like he knows how to work. Why don't we put him in charge of everything, and I'll just be lazy and do nothing? So that worked well for Joseph. He was put in charge of everything. Well, pretty soon, a couple of really important prisoners came in. One was the cupbearer of the king, the one that brings the wine to the king. The king in Egypt is called the Pharaoh. And the other one was the baker of the Pharaoh. Well, they both had dreams. And Joseph is thinking like, I know what those dreams are about. Because Joseph not only had dreams, but he knew how to interpret dreams. So he said to the cupbearer, the significance of your dream is that you will be taken back to the king and you will be in his service. So you will get your old job back. Not such good news for the baker. The baker had dreamed that he had a big basket on his head full of bread and the crows were eating the bread. What that meant was that the baker was going to die. He was going to be killed by the Pharaoh. So you see, Pharaoh is someone who has a lot of power, and it doesn't have to make any sense what he chooses to do if that's what he chooses to do. And so when the cupbearer left the prison, Joseph said, please, don't forget about me. Remember, I helped you to get out, and can you please remember about me? And of course, the cupbearer said, oh, of course I'll remember you. I'll do anything I can for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Forgot all about him. Until some years passed, and Pharaoh had a dream. He had the oddest dreams. He dreamed that there were 7 stalks of wheat, which were nice and fat and plump and healthy. And along came 7 stalks of skinny, ugly wheat. And the skinny, ugly wheat stalks ate up the fat stalks. Chomp, chomp, chomp. That was an odd dream. Then he had another dream that there were 7 fat, sleek, meaty cows, and they were eaten up by skinny, ugly cows. 7 fat cows eaten by 7 skinny cows. So he was disturbed about that dream. He brought in all his magicians and said, what's the meaning of my dream? And he told him the dream. And they said, we really don't know the meaning of your dream. What? You don't know the meaning of my dream and you call yourselves magicians? But then the cupbearer finally remembered there's a man in the prison who knows how to interpret dreams. Let's call him in here. So Joseph got all showered and dressed up and all ready to go see the king of Egypt. And he said, I cannot interpret your dream, but the Lord will give me the interpretation. So that was good. That was humble. He wasn't going to take credit for something that really is a gift from the Lord. So he said there will be 7 fat years when we'll have a lot of good money and we'll have a lot of good crops and we'll have a lot of good wealth coming into Egypt. And they'll be followed by 7 lean years of famine where people all over the world will be starving. So Pharaoh said, I need to organize this. Who could be smart enough and clever enough to organize all of this for me? I know. How about Joseph? So Joseph gained in a lot of power, and he was in charge of getting the country ready in the 7 fat years for the lean years that were coming up. All over the world there was a famine, and people who had heard there's grain in Egypt, let's go down to Egypt to buy some grain. And who do you think came marching in to Joseph's palace? It was the 10 brothers who had put him in a well and sold him into slavery. They didn't recognize him. He looked like some kind of prince of Egypt. He looked terrific. And he looked, just completely different than they did. But he recognized them right away. And in a very kind of biblical way of doing things, he said, I'm going to play a few tricks on these guys. And he said, you are spies. How come 10 of you brothers are coming together? You're spies. You're spying out the land so that you can steal all of our grain. No. We're not spies. We're just sons of one father, and we are here to buy grain. See, we have our money right in our hands. And they had each brought a little sack of money. He said, so you say you're 10 brothers of one father. Is that right? There's 10 of you? They said, well, there's actually 12. One of them died, referring to Joseph. And then there's another one who's not here with us, and his name is Benjamin, and he is the apple of his father's eye, and that's the youngest brother. Oh, okay. So you say that you're 12 brothers, but one is dead, and you could prove that to me by bringing your youngest brother with you when you come back. I'll sell you some grain right now, but if you want to get more grain, you're going to have to bring that youngest brother, because right now I think that you are spies. I don't believe anything you're saying. So Joseph went out of the room for a while, and the brothers started saying, oh, we are being punished for the way we treated our brother Joseph. And Reuben said, didn't I tell you not to harm the boy, but you wouldn't listen? Well, now they were listening. So Joseph filled their sacks with grain, and he returned their money in their bags. So they didn't actually pay for anything. Well, they didn't know that. They got all the way home, and they said, well, we met this man in Egypt, and he gave us grain, and they started opening their bags to show their father how much grain they had, and sure enough, there was all their money. They said, oh no, what has happened? Why are we receiving all of our money? Something's wrong here. And after a while, the grain gave out. They were still hungry again. And they started to argue with their father. They said, well, we can go back to buy some more grain, but we need to take our youngest brother with us. Why do you need to do that? Because, he said, if you do not bring your youngest brother with you, you will not see my face again, and you cannot buy any grain. And we're already going to be in enough trouble because of all the grain that's missing. All the money that was put back into our bags. And their father said, well, why did you tell him you had a younger brother? Because he asked us, tell me about your family so I will know that you're not spies. Jacob said, nope, not going. Okay, so they waited and waited and got more and more hungry. Every single person in the family was getting very hungry. And Jacob said, go down to Egypt and buy some grain. And they started all the way over it again. They said, we can't go down and buy more grain because the man said if he saw us again, you know what? My timer's going, but I don't want to stop this story. So I'm going to go stop my timer. Can you wait for me a minute? Thank you. We're back. I hope that my little birdie was entertaining you. So Jacob finally said, all right, take the boy, and if I die of grief, then I die. He just accepted it. There was just nothing else to do. So off they went to Egypt. And they did see Joseph again, and they said, "Sir," they knew how to treat him very politely. They said, "Sir, we found our money in our bags, and we don't know why that happened. And we brought the money back and twice as much so that we could buy more grain." And Joseph said, "Don't worry about it. God has blessed you. We received your money." Then they were really even more confused because they didn't know how they got that money back. And he said, "So you brought the youngest son here? That little guy right over there? Is that, what's his name again?" Benjamin. Well, Benjamin was not only special to Joseph and Jacob because he was young and cute, but also his mother had died in childbirth. Rachel had died in childbirth. So losing Benjamin would be like losing everything to Jacob. That's how special he was. So he said, "Well, I'll sell you some more grain, but let's eat first. You're invited to eat with me." He couldn't eat with them because Egyptians didn't eat with Hebrews. That's just the way it was back then. So well, what he did was to set them all in order around the table, youngest to oldest. That was interesting. Or maybe it was oldest to youngest. And they looked at each other like, how would he know that? And then he gave each one portions of food, but Benjamin's portion was larger than anyone else. Well, why would that be? So he gave them their grain, but unknown to them, he put all their money back in their, he wasn't going to let them pay. He put all the money back in their sacks again, and he put his silver goblet, his favorite silver goblet, in Benjamin's sack. That's a trick to play on the brothers. So the brothers were thinking like, okay, we got out of this all right. We've still got the little son, and we're all together. Let's go back to Jacob before something else happens. But then suddenly there was chariots chasing after them on their donkeys. Well, they can't fight against chariots, so they stopped everything, and they said, "What's wrong? We paid." They said, "Why did you take my master's goblet?" "We didn't take anybody's goblet. Wouldn't have taken, why would we even have your master's goblet? We didn't, no. Just look, we'll open up our bags and you'll see that we didn't take anything that we didn't pay for." Well, each one's money was in their bag. That looked a little suspicious. And then when they opened the bag of the youngest child, who was Benjamin, what did they find but their master's silver goblet? And the men on chariots said, "You're coming back to Egypt. Let's go." So they went back to Egypt feeling very sorrowful, and they really felt like God was punishing them for what they had done so many years before, when they had thrown Joseph in a well and sold him as a slave and lied to their father. So they said, "We have nothing to say. We didn't take this stuff, but we don't know what happened. And we are slaves of you from now on. We're slaves. That's all we can do." Well, Joseph, I don't know really how, we'll never know how long he had planned to carry the joke or whether he was joking, but he said he couldn't take it anymore. So he left the room and he cried so loud that all the Egyptians could hear him and think, what is going on? They weren't like people that like to show their emotions like the Hebrews did, I'm guessing. But anyway, he came back and he said, "Look, I'm your brother Joseph." And then they were really terrified because they said, "Oh no, he could kill us all. He's got all this power, and he's Joseph, and he didn't die, and he's not a slave, and he's in charge of everything, and he could kill us all." He said, "No." And he said a very famous thing. He said, "What you did, you meant it for evil. And what God did was he took what was evil and made it into something good." He said, "Now go back to Canaan and tell your father that I am alive. Bring your whole family down here. We're going to find a place for us all to live together. Bring your flocks, bring your wives, bring your children. bring everything, and tell your father that I am alive. And, by the way, do not argue along the way, because he knew these brothers of his really loved to argue. So they went back to Jacob. They said, your son is alive. Here we are. He's invited us to come live in Egypt. There's plenty of grain for us, and we'll be happy from now on. So Jacob went down to Egypt with his whole family, and the family lived there for more than 400 years. And that's the end of the story of Joseph. And I can't wait to tell you about Moses. So thank you for joining me.